Okay, welcome back to Senate Education. It is March 31st, 4:30. We are moving on to career and technical education funding. Just for some quick background, and then we'll turn it over to our witnesses. Mr. Emerson contacted me around the issue that we're going to hear from the four of you on, and I'm wondering whoever best to start, if you would frame the problem that we are trying to solve with this, or what you need us to do to help solve that problem. So is it Mr. Farr? Are you going to begin?
Yeah, I thought so, if that's okay.
Terrific. And I am going to, just so everyone knows, I'm going to keep this, we're going to have a 4:50 hard stop because senators have a number of different evening meetings and commitments, and I want to make sure that they have a break before they move on to their additional work. So with that, Mr. Farr, please.
Yeah, so I'm Scott Farr. I'm the Superintendent Director for the River Valley Technical Center in Springfield, Vermont, and we serve about 300 students from Vermont and New Hampshire. As you know, COVID-19's had an impact on all of us in all kinds of different ways that we would never even imagine. And for CTE, it has to do with the nature of our schools and how we're funded. So I estimate that because our students come to us as a school of choice, I estimate for my school alone that 50 or 60 students aren't coming to my school that have something to do with COVID. And my peers will echo that in their districts as we get to it. And really, we have to recruit our students. And that what we're looking for is a held harmless provision for CTE to kind of bridge the gap until we get back to a normal way, a normal routine of funding us, and that's on a 6-semester average. But if you do the 6-semester average, that's 3 years out that the impact for CTE is going to be felt. And so we're looking to have the funding system kind of some sort of a gap bridge until we get until more normal times. And it's our outreach and recruitment has been affected last year. January to April is pretty much what we call recruitment season. And that's when you see the ads on WCAX and you start seeing Facebook notifications and WFFF this year. And that's when you know it's recruitment season. So we got cut off last year of, finishing recruitment season because the pandemic hit and everybody was worried about taking care of the kids, and rightfully so during this, and didn't finish our outreach recruitment activities, which is the #1 way that students walk through our door. And that continues to affect us because we can't get students into our buildings to check us out and say, hey, do you see yourself in this possible career field, just because of the restrictions of the Strong and Healthy Plan. Student scheduling. Students couldn't fit it in their schedules, and they weren't given time to talk to their guidance counselors about worrying about all of this, because we were going from April to June just running schools remotely and taking care of kids and getting them involved, that scheduling for the next year got kicked down the road. And then what happened at the beginning of August, which will be echoed here, is a lot of students decided not to go to their regional tech centers for lots of different reasons. It can be schedules didn't align, whatnot. Parents didn't feel it was safe to go to a school like, for instance, Burlington or Essex Tech, where there's multiple schools where kids are mixing and all that. Parents may say, I don't think so. And then alignment of regional schedules. Coordination of a schedule during COVID times with 12, even 3 sending districts is hard because everybody has had a different approach of how they're going to serve their students in a time of COVID. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they coordinated with the regional technical center. Some had a little better case of that than others, but it made it harder. Which days were they remote? Which weren't? Were they going partial days? So all those different ways that it could get sideways, it got sideways, and it affected our enrollments. And then, so we're looking for a hold harmless provision. Hopefully it'll get us through 2025. It's good to hear that the funding may have a long tail, because I sat and watched your previous episode. I can't imagine. You guys have been heard a lot of this, so thank you very much. So we're looking a way to do that. And I'm also tipping my hand to some work that Bill Talbot did with us and Deb Brighton under Act 189. Your tech center down in Bennington, and Michael Owl was involved with us, that maybe we need to move to a different funding model for this and more reasons that historically have plagued student enrollments, where we're in a competitive funding system where there's a disincentive for the local high school. So I included some of those documents just to say, hey, maybe we got to look at that too at some point. So that's kind of concludes my testimony. I turn it over to my peers, but everybody had a little bit of version of the 60 kids that I lost in their stories. So with that, if you don't have any questions for me, I'll ask Brian to take the next tech.
Great. I just want to first thank you for bringing this to our attention. Mr. Nolan was in contact with me about this, but today, just for clarity, we are talking about the hold harmless provision. Later on, we could always have you back to talk about funding in general, and I would, I'm sure the committee would welcome that conversation. One question, Mr. Farr. I mean, I can understand why parents may have made the decisions they made, as you outlined. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, what we have in Bennington, where the high school is next door, we're a bit of an anomaly, I think, down here. Is that accurate, that in other parts of the state, it's not really always connected to the high school? In other words, not as easily accessible? Is that accurate, or most of the technical centers similar to what we have?
Most technical centers are affixed to a high school, but they could have a dozen or more other high schools that send students there. I have 4 or 5. Everybody has a little different version of that. The smallest technical center region is up in Enosburg, where they have Enosburg and Richford High School. So it ranges from 2 to whatever number that Jason has, or Hartford has, which is in the
16 is the highest.
16.
Okay. So, and then before I pass it on to Senator Hooker, if I may, so you are also receiving, I suspect, how are all the federal funds that we just talked about? Are those sort of missing you, or is there some way that they can be helpful to you? Please.
Well, I've witnessed I've witnessed House Education yesterday and the long tail discussion today of who really has the say on these funds, and then how do tech centers fit in?
Mm-hmm.
And supervisory union tech centers, which are all but 3, there may be an easier path for those funds to relieve them, whereas independent CTE centers, Bennington, myself, and Dana in Middlebury, it's not so clear. So, but I also remember that I had to make a case for independent tech centers being eligible for CRF funds, and then we weren't, and now we are. So some of it falls within the definition and interpretation. I know that I serve students that are in grades 9 through 12 and some middle school students for after school programs. And I've been impacted in lots of different ways. And I think I should have, our independent technical centers and technical centers should have some level of eligibility to mitigate the effects of this. But there's a lot of interpretations of how that happens. So I appreciate people questioning that, and I witnessed some of that yesterday and today. So,
yes. Senator Hooker.
Actually, that was the question I was going to ask, and how that how the federal funds could facilitate this kind of bridge money that you're looking for. But my other question, Mr. Farr, is when you talk about the 60 students. Those are 60 students who had started programs and then didn't come back, or does that include, the anticipated enrollment for the fall?
60 students is what I had at the same time last year, roughly. Yeah. Okay. So who knows? We were a little late in our recruitment last year, so that hung over. So it's a guesstimate, but I'm not the only one that had the issue a different version. I'll add that in studying up for this, my actually daily attendance of the tech center students that I do have is up 15% on an average daily basis. So once they came, they continued to come. We're 4 days a week, and they've been great. So the ones that we got are here at a higher rate.
And one other question, if I may.
Hmm.
How has COVID affected you as far as cases within the CTEs? And maybe each of you could talk about your experience with, the positive cases that you've had, if you've had any.
I've had about half a dozen, and I haven't had to close my whole school because we were following the distancing piece. And when you kind of study the situation and what happened and how it happened, that people wear masks and people were maintaining the 6 feet distancing. So I've been able to stay open all but one program for one time, and it was actually the teacher who had to quarantine because on this particular day they spent more than 15 minutes, or couldn't tell if it was 15 minutes, with one particular student who we found out later was positive. And that's the only place where I had to kind of adjust my regular scheduling. For the most part, everybody, the teachers have been great, and the students have responded wonderfully, is what I've seen in my district. And I'll turn it over to my peers.
Mr. Emerson, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you for getting us in so quickly. This kind of came down quick, so really appreciate the response. And I just want to support everything that Mr. Farr has said. We've had a similar situation. By the way, I'm Brian Emerson, the director of Riverbend Career and Tech in Bradford, Vermont. We're one of the smaller centers, and we're down between 13 and 17 students from where we projected we should be. And I was even a little conservative in my estimate. So, it could be as much as 20, but at least 13. The issue is that with my little tech center, I have a little over a $2 million budget. And when you do the math, that equates out to about $200,000. So about 10% of my budget because of COVID. It is directly related back to COVID. I want to support what Mr. Farr said. I received many phone calls in the fall from parents saying, we run a half-day program, and so the students still spend half a day at their high school and half a day with us. And parents were saying, due to the virus and exposure, we're going to have to pick one school. And I'm sorry that they're going to go to their home high school so they can graduate. And you can't argue with that. But again, it doesn't do anything for my revenue. My issue is that if we continue on this path, I'm probably looking at cutting programming. And one of the programs I may end up cutting is construction, which deals with plumbing and electrical. And I have plumbers and electricians just calling me every day looking for apprentices, to go into that. And I'm sure you folks have been seeing all the data coming out of the Department of Labor. So, it's kind of like a small snowball effect. It's not going to help anything if I don't have enough revenue. So I have to cut my program that has low numbers. It just so happens one of my program with low numbers, one of the programs at the Department of Labor is saying, we need to keep this up. We need to do more to make more students eligible so that they can, or attracted to this.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Is it pronounced Gingold?
Hi, everyone. Gingold.
Gingold. My apologies. Please.
Okay.
Yeah. Add to the conversation, and then Mr. Peterson.
Yep. So I'm going to read mine. I'll be quick. I see your hard stop, so I appreciate that. Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon. I'm Jason Gingold, Director of Burlington Tech Center. We serve 12 different high schools, 6 different counties, and over 280 students. 49% of our students receive free and reduced meals. 7% of our students are English language learners, and 19% are on a service plan. So we're working with the most vulnerable populations. I'd like to refresh your memory from a 2016 speech then Lieutenant Governor Scott gave as he ran for his current office. And I'm paraphrasing, but Governor Scott described how Dick Flies, a vocational education teacher, had mentored him and guided him to take college classes in the morning and vocational machinist classes in the afternoon. As we know, this led Governor Scott to University of Vermont, where he earned his teaching certification and then a successful career in construction, and now he is governor. I remind you of this story because COVID has disrupted this kind of pathway for our students. Students do not have access to career and technical education anymore, like Governor Scott had. This year alone, we lost 49 students due to scheduling issues. Students had to choose between going to their high school or coming to our programs that the Vermont Department of Labor has outlined in need. On the own state agency hiring job board, automotive technology, there's at least 12 positions open. Students didn't come to our auto program because they had to decide between their own high school or come into career. Same thing with aviation, health sciences, our education program, hospitality, and advanced manufacturing. As Mr. Farr and Mr. Emerson have described, COVID-19 impacts our future enrollments. Right now, normally we'd be recruiting 10th graders, 200 or 300 would come from our 12 different high schools in person and get that mentoring bond and meet their teacher and see what our career center is like. However, we've been doing this virtually through open houses. We're relying upon students who are teenagers. And if you have a teenager, you know what that responsibility can be like for them to log on themselves, to go to another website and decide this career pathway for themselves. And as you've heard, our recruitment efforts are the sole source of income for our career centers. So as Mr. Farr related to, we'd love to come back and talk about our funding model. Let's see, paraphrasing here because of time. I'd also just like to refer back to Secretary French, his slides in the January presentation to the legislature on, he discussed how funding should be needed for facilities issues. And if you're familiar with Burlington High School and Burlington Technical Center's facility issue, that on September 8th, our building had to close due to PCBs in the air. And it's very fortunate that the high school has been able to move into downtown Macy's. And we're fortunate that we've had to find 8 different locations to house our 12 technical programs. So we're not as fortunate in the sense of that we are looking for funding to help direct fund our building issue, because again, we provide direct access to Vermont's workforce, whether it's enrollment, enlistment, or employment. Our Career Center has a 96% placement rate after our students are done with BTC. And if they don't have a place to actually physically go to school, meet their teacher, work with our high-tech equipment and facilities, that's going to impact the Vermont labor market. Whether they also stay in Vermont will be another impact. So it's been quite a year between COVID and PCBs, just like to paraphrase that. And I think I will stop there due to time. Thank you.
That's very helpful. I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the connection to the Department of Labor. And we can always have you all back, but this gives us a terrific overview. Mr. Peterson, I can assure you the screen will not go blank at 4:50. So take your time. Eager to hear well, maybe not take your time, but we're eager to hear what you have to say, and glad you're here.
Be careful what you ask for, Chairman.
Well, I'm just covering myself in case you live in Bennington County. You know, if you're up in Chittenden or one of these other districts, you know, the screen might go off at 4:50.
Be careful what you say.
I heard about what happened last week. So, so thank you very much, Senators, for giving us this opportunity to speak. I'll address Senator Hooker's request for a number of cases that we've had. We had 2 this year, also based on the same reasons that Scott Farr mentioned. We've been able to maintain physical distance and all the mitigation measures in place. And the only time we had to cancel any of our programming was because of a teacher who needed to quarantine as well. And that was only for 1 day, I believe. We also faced reducing 3 programs this year as a result of low enrollments. We decided with some support from the school board to go ahead and continue to fund those, but that's going to create some stress and pressure fiscally on us. But we did make that decision because we felt that it was really outside of the control of our center. To give you some ideas, the first thing that I want to mention is that we've made really great inroads, both in Addison County. We have 3 partner schools in Addison County, and then we serve probably another 4 or 5 outside, including Windsor, Chittenden, and Rutland counties. So we've been working on building a strong representation among all of our various counterparts. including the home study population, and that almost fell off the cliff completely this year as a result of inability to recruit, as Scott Farr has already mentioned. We had built up a really strong feeding program, but just to give you an idea, my colleagues have already mentioned some of their numbers. I went through and counted every single one. We lost 70 students between the end of June and the beginning of September. 31 of those students unenrolled in the last week. So almost 50% of them unenrolled in the week before school started. Those were, that resulted in an approximate drop of 10 FTEs. And that's how we get our funding. We had 140 FTEs around August 15th, and that dropped to 126. So just to give you an idea of how precipitously things fell off the rails. That was 3 times any attrition rate that I have experienced since I've been here, and this is my 4th year. By comparison, in the fall of 2019, we had 147 FTEs that were solid. And as of our account date, that's what we had. So basically, we've lost almost 20 FTEs in comparison from one year to the next. When you look at that, a 10 FTE drop is the equivalent of $230,000. A 20 FTE drop is equivalent to $460,000. Just so that you can put that in perspective. So it's also had an equitable distribution impact on the tax burden of our various partner schools and partner towns. We serve 17 different towns. And when that distribution gets skewed, then people end up paying disproportionately to the usage. We'll talk about that in another session when we talk about funding in general. But here are some of the things that contributed to our drop in student participation. Oh, and by the way, last year we served the 2nd largest number of students in the state. It was 399 students that we served last year, and that was pretty impressive, we thought. But lack of coordination, all the good work that we had done on our scheduling with our partner towns fell by the wayside as a result of the change in schedules that every single regular ed high school put into place, because they all had to change it based on their own needs. Scheduling conflicts resulted as a result of those plans that they put in place impacted as a result of multiple different schedules that we were trying to contend with, to the point where the only vestiges of a common schedule was what we had and what we opened with on September 8th. And some of the impact was that we had some students in a pre-tech program, for example, that could only come 1 day a week as a result of those scheduling complexities. And then we had some students, as Scott and others have said, that made choices based on the individual health circumstances or their family's health circumstances. We learned that we would have to design a solution to get some of our students to the Career Center in order for them to be able to access programming. And so we ended up putting together a transportation program that we funded primarily through CRF and GEAR to be able to get students to the Career Center that they wouldn't have been able to come. We're happy to announce that 80% of our students, we did a survey as well, 80% of our students and families felt that it was important to come in person. And so that's what we've been serving since we started in September. Let's see, our outreach, as others have mentioned, was impacted significantly. I'll give you a few figures. We usually have over 400 plus people come to a gala event where we open it up to the entire community. We get partners, we get families, we get students and folks who support CTE to come out and visit our event in February. We weren't able to run that this year. And that doesn't include the 900 students that we usually service in a 2-month period who are able to come into the center and visit. And as Jason Gignold mentioned earlier, to actually make connections with potential mentors, future mentors.
Mr. Peterson, I'm afraid that we are going to have to leave it there unless you have a final bit of information that would be new to us that you think is essential at this point.
The 6-semester average, I don't know if Mr. Farr mentioned that, but the 6-semester average drop will affect us for the next 3 years.
Okay. So
Yeah,
my
that's-
plan is to take this up again on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And please, if you would be so kind as to follow our work. And we're happy to have you back in. And certainly if there are any questions raised that you would like to answer or additional information after watching some additional testimony that you would like to weigh in on, I hope you all let us know. But this group is a big fan of career technical education. And when this is all finished, by finished, I mean we're feeling safe to get out, we would love to come and have a look around.
Love
So
to have you.
thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Senators, I think we will end there. And Jeannie, if you wouldn't mind staying online, and I'm not seeing any immediate questions from anyone. So if not, then look forward to seeing you all soon.
Take care.